Now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Andy Rundquist, the Associate Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and a professor of physics. In addition to being a mean brass player, he also likes to blow things up. Andy will be telling you a little bit more about how academics at Hamline can change your life and share some tips about how to maximize your time as a piper both in and outside of the classroom. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Mania. It's so great to be here with everybody. Admitted Student Days is one of my very favorite days. I just love being able to share what I love about Hamline and to get people excited about coming and thinking about how they might grow as a student. Just going to share a screen here. Wait for it to load. All right. So what I'm going to talk about is the title here, Academics at Hamline. And I just want to make clear the role that Mania was just describing. So both the Associate Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and a physics professor. And now I'm actually teaching a computational data science course. That's actually what I'm working on this afternoon. So I just want to tell a few stories about how I think students can optimize their education at Hamline and the opportunities that exist. There we go. So the first thing that I want to talk about is ownership. So one of the things that I've noticed is that, especially with first-year students, sometimes it takes a while for students to realize that they need to own their education. So for me, I have lots of ways to describe what that looks like. I think about what it means to walk into a classroom and have students just raring to go and to think about what are we going to do today. And of course, my favorite days are the days when I don't know what we're going to do because the class has planned something and we're going to work on it together. One of the things, though, that is sort of a sign for me that a student hasn't quite figured out exactly how to do that is when I walk into a classroom, and this happens generally early in the semester, usually in a first-year student class. And the first thing that I notice is that all the lights are off. And so I walk in and I'm like, what the heck? And I'll turn on the lights. And sometimes I'll get a reaction from students saying, well, we weren't sure if we were allowed to turn these lights on. And I'd really love to respond and say, look, this is your education. You're paying for it. You need to own it. Turn the lights on and we can really grow together. So another story that I like to tell about the difference between high school and Hamline happened to me several times, actually. So a very slight different version of this happened to me several times. I was teaching a first-year seminar. And often in those seminars, students are building things. This particular year that I'm thinking of, it was a catapult. And so each group of students had to build a gigantic catapult, and they were graded based on how far they could throw a watermelon. And one of the things that happened early on in the semester is a group of students showed up and said, boy, you know what, we can't do anything today during class. And I said, well, why? Why can't you get anything done during class today? And their answer was, well, we were realizing that to build everything, we were going to need a special screw and that we didn't have it and that we needed to figure out a way to do it. So one of the things we thought maybe we could do is to think about how we could possibly do that and how we might possibly have the time to go. And I looked at them and I said, how about right now? And they're like, well, no, it's class time. We have to be here. And again, my theme of owning your own education, I said to them, you just told me that you have nothing you can possibly do in class today because your one little screw that you're missing is keeping you from taking your next step towards the learning outcomes we have in this class. And the really interesting thing is you can walk to a hardware store from Hamline University. The really beauty of where Hamline lies in the city of St. Paul, we have access to so many resources. And so I encourage them right then and there to go and buy the screw. Of course, I paid for it. We have plenty of funds for things like this if we're going to have them build catapults. And they understood that, oh, so we can go during class. And I said, sure. My favorite part about that story actually happened a couple of months later. It was late November, maybe early December, right around the time they were putting the final touches on their catapults. And showed up to class and my phone in my pocket buzzed and I pulled it out and it was a text from that same team. And all it said was, we're at Menards, be there soon. And what I love about that is several things. Number one, they remembered that I needed to know. right? Because it was class time and I had expectations for things to happen during class. And number two, they realized that their most important thing at that moment was to go to Menards and buy something for their catapult. And they just knew they needed to let me know about it. To me, that's what owning your education looks like. And it's one of my highest goals for all students. And I work very hard to try to provide as many opportunities as I can for students to be able to achieve that. Another thing that I like to talk to prospective students about is a question that you're probably going to get tired of. What are you going to major in? What are you passionate about? A lot of students will get this question about something that they're passionate about and that they should follow their passion. And I actually think that's a great conversation, but I've actually found a much better question to ask, especially students in your situation that you're in right now. I think it's interesting to hear about what you're passionate about, but I'm way more interested in hearing about problems that you enjoy solving. And I want to be able to explain the difference between those two. So when you wake up, when you look up at a clock and realize that it's 2:30 in the morning and you have been working on something and not even realize that it's past midnight, that's a problem that you enjoy solving. It's not easy. You might not be great at it, but you really want to get it done and you're willing to put the time in to the point where when you look up, you don't even realize how late it is, just as this little drawing that I'm showing you is showing. I drew this a couple nights ago, by the way. I'll talk more about why these videos are running at the end. So for me, thinking about problems that you enjoy solving is a way more interesting conversation when thinking about what you might want to study or major in or minor in or go to graduate school for, just like Ben. So what does that look like? Well, number one, problems that you enjoy solving aren't necessarily the problems that you're good at. See, it's my job, it's all of my colleagues' job here at Hamline to help you get good at it. We want you to already enjoy the problems. So when I think about the students who have, put tons of time into building a tree fort in their backyard, or the students who have really thought long and hard about how to go do a fundraiser to help their neighbors, and again, look up and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and they're still working at it. I want students to really reflect on that and to think about the problems that they enjoy solving. One last example about passion. If you're passionate about world peace, that's fantastic. We need people to feel that way. But what does it take to achieve world peace? There's a ton of negotiation. There's a ton of sort of closed off alleyways. There's a ton of just getting frustrated with things. And not everyone enjoys solving those problems. So of course, be passionate about lots of things, but really to think about the type of problem solving that you enjoy doing. When I think about what students should be planning on doing with their lives at Hamline, of course you should sign up for classes, of course you should do lots of things. I think about 4 things, these 4 that are listed here on the screen. 4 things that I think you should try to get as many of as possible in your education. So let me just go down all of them here. So an internship is a hallmark of a Hamline education because all of Hamline's undergraduate programs really are all about making you be a practitioner while you are here. So every school in the country will say that it's prepping you to become a practitioner in your field of study when you leave. And that's great. But at Hamline, we feel the very best way for you to do that is to become a practitioner while you're here. And doing an internship can help you have the academic reflection on that internship that is so crucial. So we say, in shorthand, that every student is required to take an internship. Actually, if you look at the way the requirements are written, every student is required to have an academic reflection on an internship experience. And so really, we want to make sure that you're getting as much out of that as possible as you're developing the skills to become a practitioner and while you're actually being a practitioner. Of course, study abroad is a super important thing, and really, I should have said study away. We really want to make sure that students have an opportunity to jump into communities that are different than right on Hamline's campus. And so we want to encourage that you have opportunities to do that, and we make sure we build the structures to help you with that. This drawing that I'm drawing right now, I'm not actually drawing it right now, I drew it 2 days ago. is all about collaborative research that Ben talked about a little bit. So I'll jump to something more so that you can see the rest of the drawing first. They might not be directly in the academics that we're talking about. So if you look at what Yudu is doing with all of the internship work and the work that she's doing at the Capitol, if you look at what Ben is doing with baseball, I encourage all students to find something that they can really throw their heart into that's beyond the requirements that we're putting in front of you. One of the things I am marveling at is that as a physics professor, for 10 years, there was a physics major who was a captain on the football team. It wasn't the same person for 10 years. Of course not. We didn't just hold them back so that they could stay and be a physics major with us. It was like 5 different students. And what I noticed that they were physics majors, some of them were physics math double majors, and they were the captain of the football team. And it's just so cool to go out and cheer for them and to talk to them about the leadership skills that they develop in those positions. Let me get back to collaborative research. It's a fascinating story that I like to share. So when I'm a physics professor, I'll hire students to work with me in the summer, just like what Ben was talking about. And often, I'm working with them and I would sort of give them some direction, give them some things to do. And there was one summer that I had to be gone for 2 weeks. And I was very, very nervous to leave those students behind for those 2 weeks. And so we made a gigantic to-do list, just all kinds of things. And I would say, well, if this doesn't work, then do this. If this doesn't work, then do this. And of course, we were all aiming to try to optimize the experiment as best we could because we were just dying to get some data that we could do some analysis on. I said that I would check in with them, but it turned out to be really hard to check in during those 2 weeks. So I was fretting about the work that they were doing. Frankly, I was a little bit nervous that maybe they'd get nothing done, and did I have to have a talk with them about whether it was worth it to pay them for not getting anything done. When I came back, again, very, very anxious about what I was going to find, I walked down the hall into the lab and I looked at what they were up to, and all 3 of them were in there. Let's see, there was 2 rising juniors and 1 rising senior. So 2 of them had just finished their sophomore year. Oh, sorry, 1 had finished their first year, as I think about it. And I looked at their apparatus and I got furious. I couldn't believe it. My worst fears had happened because they had built something that there was no way it could work. So I walked up to them, I marched up to them, and I just started yelling, and I literally grabbed the screwdriver and I started taking things apart while I was saying, I can't believe we wasted this opportunity. And then those 3 students said the bravest thing that I have ever heard. They looked at me and they said, stop. And I looked at them and I said, what? Because I was so angry. And they said to me, look, we knew that we needed to get this to work. And believe it or not, this apparatus is the only way that we can get these 2 things to work together, because I had started to take apart both of them. And they said, we have data that we hope that you're excited about, but why are you taking apart our apparatus? And then they said the 2 words I'll never forget, get out. So they pushed me out of the lab. And as I stood in the hallway fuming, I suddenly realized that's what success looks like. Those students had owned it. They had made it their own. And what I found was that at the end of that summer, when those students were giving a poster presentation, a very different thing settled on me. There are some times when students give a poster presentation when I feel like I need to be there as a backup, so that if someone comes and asks them a question that's difficult, I can sort of slink in and say, oh, well, yeah, I understand what you're saying, and they don't know about that, so let me help you. And ever since that summer, when I was told to get out of the lab, I no longer even need to be in the room because my students can handle it. Not that they know all the answers, but if they're asked, well, why didn't you use a separate camera for that? They might say, oh, that's a really great question. We didn't think about it because we didn't know if we could afford one. But now that you say it, I think that we could use that second camera to do this. And I am so proud to watch them demonstrate that ownership of their learning. And I'm so happy that Hamline, just as Ben said, provides this kind of opportunity for all students in all disciplines, not just physics, not just exercise science. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is a paradigm that we use when talking, especially with first-year students, but with all students. It's called the SEEC paradigm, S-E-E-C, and I'll break down the words for you here. So the first one is that you can see that ideas are connected, right? Nothing off the top of your head. Don't show up to a discussion and just try to babble on without having read the materials. You need to see that these ideas are connected. You need to explore these ideas and explore those connections. You need to go to the hardware store and buy that screw so that you can figure it out. You need to evaluate these connections. You really need to dig in to look to see if they're fake news. Look to see how they might be connected. And what's really interesting is to put on different lenses so that you can look at these connected ideas in very, very different ways. And the most important thing, including in your very first semester, is that you contribute, that you start finding that thing you don't even realize that it's 1:35 in the evening, and that you're willing to put the time and energy into it. The last thing that I want to say is talk about these videos that I've been showing you. One of the things that we'd love to do at Hamline is to really help students understand the material that they're working on and to try to understand how they're thinking about it. So if I just showed you these 4 drawings, you'd probably say that I'm a sucky drawer, and you'd be right. You know, I'm trying, I'm practicing. And I drew all 4 of these Thursday night as I was thinking about this presentation. But here's the thing. You didn't just see the end result. You saw how I did it. You saw that I had to zoom in on this hand. You saw that I had to zoom in on this face, and you can tell that I did not do a great job with it. You saw that I was really, really interested in these paint buckets, and yet now they hardly seem to be anything in the drawing. And that's the type of thing that Hamline faculty want to do. They want to see your process and your product so that we can help you be as good as you can be. Thank you all so much. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I really, really look forward to meeting you.
Thank you so much, Andy, for those inspirational words and also showing a little bit behind the scenes of what faculty go through as they try to nurture our students to greatness. We actually have time for some questions, and we do have questions from the audience. So can you stick with us for a couple questions?
You bet.
Awesome. So our first question from the audience is, you talked some about starting research, collaborative research with faculty. When can you actually start to do that? And what does that initial exchange look like if you're a student and you would like to do research with a professor?
Fantastic question. So there's 2 major ways that happens. Actually 3, now that I think about it. One is there's certain classes that are absolutely dedicated to students doing projects. They tend to be more in the junior year, so that and you just sign up for them, and that's pretty straightforward. The second one is figuring out how to do an honors project or a project with a faculty member on some research that they're doing. So for example, in the physics department, Professor Li Feng Dong spends a lot of time all year round working on water filters, using nanotechnology to improve water quality around the world. And he has many students working with him throughout the semesters and either getting credits or if it's in the summertime, getting paid. Now, in the summertime, what Ben was talking about is an entire program that we call formally the Collaborative Research Project. And you have an opportunity to apply. Let's see, it must be in about February. You put your applications in to say, I want to be do some collaborative research with this faculty member, probably some that you've chit-chatted with and understood a little bit more about their research. What's fascinating about it is that you can be a first-year student and do it the summer after your first year. Quickly, Mania, in the physics department, we were struggling having students go and do research experience for undergraduates at big national labs. So like at Fermi National Labs. We weren't getting as many students posted there as we liked. And we realized the reason was they needed to have a summer with us to really understand how that worked. So we started hiring earlier and earlier students, first-year students, just like the first-year student who told me to get out. And now in the summer after their junior year, we are placing students in places like Fermi National Lab.
Thank you, Andy. An additional question that we have from the audience is, as a faculty member and as a member of Hamline administration, what do you think what makes the faculty special? And how does that actually drive a student's success? So a student's ability to graduate or reach higher?
Wow, fantastic question. When I think about that, I think about faculty that really want to be working side by side with practitioners, right? It's one thing to just open your head up and dump some information in and say thank you and see you later after you graduate. It's another to just be craving that collegiality relationship so that you can be working next to us, whether it's shooting lasers at things or understanding legislation or building some sculpture, especially with my great friend, Professor Baker, in the sculpture program. Oh, one quick question that I want to share about this. Do I have time for a 2-minuter? All right, one quick 2-minute question. So I was talking to my good friend in the anthropology department, and he was telling me about how he was doing research with students up in Alaska, and they were looking at trying to figure out where some old humans had sort of settled and looking at where campfires were and things like that. And they were down on the beach, and he was pointing out that when you catch fish, humans can't eat the heads of fish, so they chop the heads off before they'd carry them up the hill. And so they were looking for fish remains that didn't have heads. And that's how they understood that maybe some humans had settled there. And a student said, "Professor, look at that." And they watched an eagle swoop down, pick up a fish, rip its head off, spit the head out, and then fly to the top of the cliff. And that's when the professor knew that they had to rethink how they were determining where the settlements were. And a student did that, a student with their eyes open, a student who had been prepared, and a student who was being supported in an environment where that kind of thinking, that practitioner thinking, was happening.
Amazing. Awesome story. Thank you so much for being with us today, Andy.